The Canadian Border Services Agency has investigated more than 500 allegations against its own employees. CBC News obtained documents that reveal the extent of the misconduct allegations, from abuse of power to soliciting bribes. The CBC's Catherine Tunney is on the story. She joins me now live from Ottawa. Catherine, what kind of complaints are we talking about here?
Well, Carol, it really runs the gamut. As you said, there's allegations of abuse of authority, bribery, misconduct, sexual harassment. There are a few cases, though, that really stand out. And one of the more serious allegations, and it was later verified, it was founded, was an officer who in the lunchroom would brag about how when he would take people aside to do searches, he would make them touch themselves and then put their hands in the mouth. And he liked to brag about that in the lunchroom. And the CBSA did investigate that case, and they said that man is no longer working for the CBSA. There's the case of $9,000 that went missing from a safe at a facility. There's a case under review right now where an officer allegedly was accepting bribes at the border. That's under review, as I said, but the case file that we saw alleges that he was accepting basically $500 for help with work permits at the border. Now, those are just three of the, as you said, more than 500 cases, complaints since the beginning of 2018 until the beginning of this year. We received that under an access information request. Now, the head of the union wanted to stress very clearly that, of course, all these cases are serious and unfortunate, but really wanted to stress that the majority of officers are quite professional, who have thousands of interactions with Canadians every year, and they aren't represented by these misconduct cases.
Okay, so take us through the agency's full response here.
Yeah, no, the CBSA says that it takes all these allegations seriously, and it investigates thoroughly. No, they do have an internal mechanism to review these kind of complaints, be it from officers themselves or from the public. But critics for years have argued that the CBSA shouldn't be allowed to investigate their own. Now, of course, officers have a lot of power at ports of entry. Some of them carry firearms. They can search people. And if you're a migrant or an immigrant, they potentially have a lot of power over your future. So there's been calls for years for an oversight, an independent outside oversight body. Earlier today, the BC Civil Liberties Association put out a statement responding to the story today, and it reads, "These complaints reveal what happens when we give unchecked power to CBSA officers who have wider powers than police agencies. Every major police agency in Canada has some form of independent oversight, yet, despite its immense powers, there is no independent civilian oversight body to investigate CBSA officer misconduct or review CBSA policies." Now, this idea of outside oversight also has political support. A bill was introduced earlier this year to address this problem. It has been stuck at second reading, of course, though, because many bills that are not COVID related have not moved through the House.
All right, Catherine, thank you so much. The CBC's Catherine Tunney in Ottawa. My next guest has first-hand knowledge about the workplace culture of the CBSA. Kelly Sundberg is a former Canada Border Services Agency officer. He is now an associate professor in the Department of Economics, Justice and Policy Studies at Mount Royal University in Calgary, and he's the founder of the International Centre for Migration and Border Security Studies. And Kelly joins us now from Calgary. Kelly, welcome to you.
Thanks for having me, Carol.
What is your reaction to these complaints?
You know, I'm not really surprised. The CBSA was formed in late 2003, so it's the agencies existed under both a conservative and a liberal government. Yet neither government has put in an independent oversight body to oversee the activities of officers in this operation. So
Why is that? Why is that, Kelly?
You know, the CBSA was formed very quickly back in 2003 in response to September 11th, and with a lot of pressure from the United States. Our country had to create an agency, and we did. Most of that agency was amalgamation between customs, immigration, and food inspection, with customs, the legacy customs officers constituting the largest portion. But when we years keep going by and we hear minister after minister saying, oh, we're going to have oversight. BC's Civil Liberties Organization has been a great proponent for fighting to have oversight, yet despite the public pressure, there really hasn't been concerted effort, in my view, to see oversight put in place.
Yeah, what's this? Spell it out for us. What is the direct relationship between the kinds of behavior we're seeing or hearing that is being complained about and the lack of oversight? Connect those two dots for me.
Well, whenever we have an organization that has incredible powers, so at the port of entry, CBSA officers operate in some regards without having to address the charter to its full extent. So the right to search without a warrant, these sort of things. So we have an agency that has incredible powers, officers that have more powers than police in many regards, which operates internationally at our borders and inside our country. And since its inception in 2003, there's been no oversight. So it's understandable that a culture would develop whereby, without oversight, we would see behaviors or activities by very few, although by some, clearly from the report that came out today and other reports, that would indicate that a culture that perhaps needs to have some work exists.
Have some work, indeed. What stood out for you among the complaints?
The concerns around the bragging or the boasting of using authority in a suggestive manner, having someone touch their genitals and then touch their face after and thinking this is funny and having it repeated. It's nice to hear that officer was terminated. But just the sheer number of complaints is concerning. And I mean, when we think of if these incidents had happened with, say, the Toronto Police Service or with another agency, there would be public outcry. But we don't see as Canadians the Border Services Agency daily. It's only when we cross the border, and so I think that is probably one reason there hasn't been the effort. It's just not as publicly known as, say, a policing agency that we see every day.
Is it the culture inside? I mean, what contributes to it when somebody feels they can brag about humiliating a citizen or can feel that they can steal a large amount of money?
I worked for the CBSA, or what's the CBSA today, for over 15 years. And by and large, the women and men who protect our borders are outstanding, ethical, professional individuals. And the leadership, some of my best bosses I've ever had are come from the CBSA. But in saying that, there is a small number, unfortunately, coast to coast. It's a large organization. There's 6,500 plus officers that have shown to be less than professional, to the point of allegedly being corrupt, and it's really what I look at is the government. Why are we not since 2003? Why don't we have oversight? And having the RCMP. Oh, go ahead.
And if somebody does have a complaint, Kelly, I mean, how do they feel comfortable taking it to their own bosses?
Well, that's the problem. If it's a member of the public, they want to make a complaint, they have to go and see the CBSA. If it's an officer, they have to go and see their boss, or if it's a boss, which is also an issue, who's harassing their employees, they have to go to the union and they still have to work at the port of entry. It's just not a great system. There's no system. That's the problem. It's internal. So when we look at other law enforcement agencies of this size, they have independent oversight. In my view, the CBSA or the Government of Canada should be looking at models such as in Ontario or British Columbia that have two very good models. But something has to be done, and it should not be left to the Commission for Public Complaints against the RCMP. They're already backlogged. So having an agency, which is one of the largest law enforcement agencies in this country, being tacked on to the RCMP oversight, in my opinion, is irresponsible, and it's simply taking an easy way out with the hopes of placating the public.
Kelly Sundberg, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Kelly Sundberg is a former CBSA officer and founder of the International Center for Migration and Border Security Studies.